learning now. Share the screen here. Okay, Hilchis Na'ar Psula, the laws of the young virgin maiden. Chamish mitzvahs, this includes 5 mitzvahs, 3 positive, 2 negative, and they are: 1, that the seducer must be fined; 2, that a man who rapes the virgin maiden should marry her; 3, he must not divorce her, unless obviously she wants him to; 4, that the wife of a man who issues a slanderous report about her should remain married to him forever. In other words, that if he tries to do her in and to lower her status, he will now lose the opportunity, the chance to ever release himself from his obligations to her. And 5, that again, he is not allowed to divorce her. Again, all of these marriages and prohibitions of divorce are provided that is what she wants. Okay, let's look a little more inside. Halacha Aleph. Misha Pita Psula. Man seduces a virgin, he is fined 50 slime of pure silver, and this is called a knas. And the same law applies if he rapes her. Payment of this fine is one of the Teida's positive mitzvahs. As Dvarim states, the man who raped her must give her, the maiden's father, 50 silver pieces. What is meant by a seducer and what is meant by a rapist? Seducer is one who enters into relations with a girl with her consent, and a rapist is one who takes her by force. In other words, abuse is abuse of a child, whether or not there's no such thing as a consensual relationship in this situation. Whenever a man enters into relations with a woman in the field, we operate under the presumption that he raped her and apply those laws unless witnesses testify that she entered into relations with him willingly. That's a pretty radical statement, if I can say so myself, that the Me Too movement that we have today, just in the last 3-4 years, where we believe women, that Rambam was writing this already then. That even if he claims no, it was consensual. If it was out in the field, in other words, if it was in a secluded space away from everyone, or something you were trying to hide, then you were wrong. Whenever a man enters into relations with a woman in a city, we operate under the presumption that she consented. In other words, if it was a public space, because she didn't cry out, unless when testified that she was raped. In other words, he pulled out a sword and told her, if you cry out, I will kill you. Halacha Gimel. This is again, the Rambam in the very first halachas is laying down a clear law. When a girl who was seduced doesn't want to marry the seducer, or her father doesn't want to give her in marriage to him, or if the seducer doesn't want to marry her, he must pay the fine and depart. We do not force him to marry her. Meaning, unless there is a willing husband and wife here, then he pays the fine. If they do desire to wed and he marries her, he doesn't pay the fine. Instead, he writes the ksuba as is written for other maidens. When, however, a woman who is raped or her father do not desire that she marry the rapist, they have the prerogative in such an instance. In other words, they always have the prerogative not to marry, but they have the prerogative of not marrying and taking the fine and departing. If she and her father desire that the marriage take place, but he does not desire, we force him to marry her. Again, she wants his, whether it's the financial support or what she believes will become the emotional support, we force him to marry her. Aside from paying the fine, as it says, he must take her as a wife. This is a positive mitzvah. Even if the girl is lame, blind, or afflicted with leprosy, which are examples of physical challenges which under other circumstances would not lead them to be married, he is forced to marry her, and he may never take the initiative of divorcing her. As the pasuk says, he may not send her away as long as he lives. This is a prohibition. In other words, the ball is in her court, and she is permitted to remain married to him for as long as she wants, and he is not given the prerogative to divorce. The girl is not granted a ksuba. Just to remind you, a ksuba is not a part of the marriage. Midairaisa, the biblical element of marriage, it is the protection that the Chachamim put into place in order to discourage divorce at whim. But our sages instituted the requirement of a ksuba so that the husband won't consider divorce a frivolous matter. In this instance, it's not necessary because the man cannot divorce his wife. Okay. What about if there's a problem in their getting married? If the girl he raped was forbidden to him, even if the prohibition stems from a positive mitzvah or she was a shnia or forbidden by other rabbinic prohibitions, in other words, it wasn't the case of a biblically illicit relationship. It's just one of those situations where it's either a positive mitzvah not to marry in such a situation or other types, he doesn't have to marry. And similarly, if he discovers the adulterous behavior on her part after he marries her, he should divorce her. These concepts are implied by the phrase, he must take the girl as his wife, which our sages interpreted to mean she must be fit to be his wife. In other words, if there's a problem with the marriage from a halachic perspective, even if it's not a biblical problem, then they don't marry. When a high priest, however, rapes or seduces a virgin maiden, he shouldn't marry her because he's commanded to marry a virgin. At the time he marries this girl, she's not a virgin. And if he marries this girl, he must divorce her. So then he would obviously have to just pay the fine, of course. Although it is said with regard to a rapist that he may not send her away as long as he lives, since this prohibition is preceded by a positive mitzvah, as it is said, he must take the girl as his wife, the Torah makes the prohibition rectifiable by observance of the positive mitzvah, referred to as a lav shenitak le'eseh, a prohibition which is redeemable. Thus, this is a negative mitzvah whose violation can be rectified by the observance of a positive mitzvah. Lashes are not given as punishment for the violation of such a mitzvah unless one does not fulfill the positive mitzvah, as will be explained in Hilchos Sanhedrin. Therefore, when a rapist violates this prohibition and divorces his wife, he is compelled to remarry her and is not punished by lashes. If, however, his divorcee dies or is consecrated by another man before he remarries her, or if he is a priest who is forbidden to marry a divorcee, he should be punished by lashes, for he transgressed the negative mitzvah and is unable to fulfill the positive mitzvah associated with this. In other words, when we say he should be punished by lashes, because he is now in a situation where, number one, he transgressed the negative mitzvah, and number two, he has lost the opportunity that would have otherwise existed of fixing that situation. Therefore, the halacha remains that he now gets lashes for what he has done. Any questions yet?
Nothing yet, Rabbi.
No questions, Rabbi.
Okay. Let's continue. Okay. Neither a rapist nor a seducer is liable to pay the fine unless he engages in relations in the ordinary fashion and the relations are observed by witnesses. A warning is not necessary. At what age is a girl fit to be paid a fine? From the age of 3 until she reaches the age of Bagrut. If a man engages in a relation with a girl less than 3 years old, the relations are not significant. And if he engages with relations with her after she reaches the age of Bagrut, he is not fined. For Deuteronomy states, a virgin maiden, thus excluding a girl who has reached maturity. Okay. Whether or not a girl's father is alive, a fine must be paid. A fine need to be paid because of relations with the following women, and these are a bogeret, a girl who has dissolved the marriage through me, and in other words, she's already been married and refused the marriage. An alienate who is incapable of having children, a mentally incompetent girl, a deaf mute, a girl who is reputed to have conducted herself immodestly while young, concerning whom two witnesses testified that she sought sexual relations with them, and a girl who was married and divorced but is still a virgin maiden. When, by contrast, a girl is divorced after merely being consecrated, a fine must be paid, and she is entitled to it if she is raped. If she is seduced, however, she's not entitled to a fine. In other words, when we talk here about being consecrated, so just yesterday we had a chuppah in our backyard. Leah Rivka, great to have you with us in this share. What we refer to by consecration is kiddushin, which is the first half of the marriage ceremony. Just a quick refresher about what that is. It is not when we are fully married. In other words, in today's modern day chuppah, the kiddushin, or the erusin as we refer to sometimes, and the nisuin are both together. But in Talmudic times, these were actually done separately. The erusin was done in the girl's home, where they had an engagement party, and from that point onwards, they were husband and wife, but not completely married. In other words, they're not allowed to be intimate with each other, and their relationship is now set. If they want to dissolve it, it requires a divorce. The Nisuin is the second half of the chuppah, where we do the brachas and stand under the chuppah, and that is only done later on. So what we're saying here is, if a woman is after kiddushin, when this happened, then then they don't pay the fine. Okay. The following rules apply with regard to a convert, a girl who was taken captive, and a Canaanite maidservant who was freed. If she was converted, redeemed, or freed before she reached the age of 3, she is entitled to a fine. If she was 3 years or older when she was converted, redeemed, or freed, she is not entitled to a fine, since relation that she engages in at this time are significant. She's placed into the category of non-virgins. In other words, once a woman reaches the first thing, before even puberty, but even the childhood maturity that a woman reaches at the age of 3, if she is at that biological age and still has not gone through with a spiritual conversion, then that time in her life is already a period of womanhood that would be outside the Jewish marriage. So therefore, it wouldn't be getting the fine. The following rules apply when the virgin who was raped or seduced was forbidden to the rapist or the seducer. If the prohibition was punishable by kares, in other words, she was his sister's aunt in the nudist state or the like, or she was forbidden by virtue of a negative mitzvah that doesn't involve kares or execution, he is not liable for a fine if he was given a warning. Instead, he should be lashed. In other words, he gets a more serious punishment. The rationale is that a person is never punished for the same transgression by both lashes and a monetary assessment. If he was not warned, in other words, if there weren't eidim that can bring him to Beis Din, since he is not to be given lashes, he should pay the fine. Yeah, these aren't easy halachas to be teaching, I have to be honest. But yeah, keep going. When the girl raped was forbidden because of a positive mitzvah, she was a shnia, or another forbidden because of another rabbinic commandment, the rapist is obligated to pay the fine whether he was warned against this aggression or not, because he is not punished by lashes, so he does need to pay the fine. When the girl raped was forbidden because of prohibition punishable by execution by the court, in other words, it was his daughter-in-law like, where he would be getting killed by the court for this. He is not liable for the fine. In other words, one act which would get the person's head chopped off does not also come with a 50 shekel fine, regardless of whether or not he received a warning. And this is derived from Exodus, which states, if there will not be a fatal accident, he should be punished. Implied is that if there is a fatal accident, no punishment should be levied. This applies although the woman was killed unintentionally. In other words, the man didn't intend to strike her. The pasuk says, if men strive and a woman receives a blow, this teaches that when a person, with regard to a fatal accident, Scripture doesn't differentiate between intentional and unintentional act of freedom from monetary obligation. In other words, if he kills a woman, he doesn't also pay a monetary fine. The act is so severe, any person, when you kill someone, right? If I abuse you, right? If I say I break someone's arm, I have to pay for the embarrassment, I pay for the medical fees, I pay for the loss of labor, I pay for the pain, right? Whereas if I kill them, I don't. Why? Because there I would be liable for my life. I'd be killed, chas v'shalom, for it. And the pasuk also says a person who fatally strikes an animal shall reimburse the owner for it, and one who fatally strikes a man must die. So just as the pasuk doesn't distinguish between intentional and unintentional action for killing an animal to make him liable for payment, so too it doesn't distinguish between intentional and unintentional action for killing a person to free him from financial obligation. This law applies with regard to every transgression that is punishable by execution by the court. There is no financial obligation. In other words, the financial penalties we put into place in order to deter a potential criminal, but if the potential punishment is capital punishment, then there is not a financial obligation. Excuse me. If a girl dies afterwards she was seduced or raped, the seducer or rapist is not liable for the fine. As implied by the pasuk, the man who raped her must give the maiden's father. The pasuk says the father of the maiden, and not the father of the dead maiden. This applies when she dies before the case comes to court. And if I could just add that the penalty that the person pays is a form of teshuvah as well. It's a form of repentance. And when that option is not made available, what we're essentially saying, we're not minimizing the severity of the action, we're emphasizing it to point out that the teshuvah through the payment of money is not available because of the severity of the crime. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks,
And
Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat
Shalom,
shalom.
everybody.
Shabbos.